The Forbidden Zone. The small alien vessel, Obsidian Voyager, drifted silently through the vastness of space, its sleek frame reflecting the distant light of distant stars. On board, the crew of 6, led by Captain Xelvar, prepared for their most daring mission yet, exploring the mysterious planet Earth. The warnings were clear. Across the galaxy, civilizations had passed down one rule about Earth: stay away. Ancient records spoke of it as a planet untouched by the galactic community, a place where even the bravest explorers were said to vanish without a trace. Earth had long been labeled as the Forbidden Zone. Yet Captain Xelvar was not one to follow rules. His mission was simple: to uncover what secrets Earth held, why it was so dangerous, and why it had been ignored for so long. "We're about to make history," Xelvar whispered, his voice a mix of excitement and nervousness. The rest of the crew gathered around the observation deck, peering through the windows at the small blue planet growing larger as they approached. A soft hum filled the ship as it entered Earth's orbit. For a moment, everything seemed normal. Earth appeared like any other planet in the galaxy, lush, vibrant, and full of life. The kind of place that would usually spark curiosity in any explorer. But the stillness in the air was unnerving. Suddenly, the ship's systems beeped and the AI Zara, an intelligent interface that controlled the vessel, spoke with an unsettling calm. "Captain, I am detecting unusual energy readings." Xelvar's brow furrowed. Unusual energy readings were not something he expected. The galaxy was full of strange phenomena. But this was different. This wasn't just a natural occurrence. Zara's voice continued, "Energy signature is unlike anything in our database." Xelvar leaned forward in his chair. "What do you mean? Can you pinpoint its source?" Zara paused, and then the AI responded. "It's coming from the planet's surface." The crew's eyes shifted nervously toward the view of Earth, which now filled the windows of the observation deck. Something about it seemed almost alive. "How do we proceed, Captain?" One of the crew members, Soren, asked with concern. His voice trembled, and he clearly felt the growing unease among them. Xelvar exhaled sharply. "Prepare for entry. We need to investigate." The crew moved into position. As the ship descended through Earth's atmosphere, something strange happened. The energy around them began to grow stronger. A pulse from the planet's surface seemed to be reaching out to them, as if it had noticed their arrival. The ship shuddered lightly as it entered the atmosphere, and Zara's voice became more urgent. "Captain, I recommend we abort this mission. The energy levels are fluctuating beyond expected limits." Xelvar ignored the warning, his curiosity outweighing any fear that lingered in the back of his mind. "We didn't come this far to turn back. Hold course." The Obsidian Voyager sliced through the air with precision, but as they approached the coordinates where the energy readings were the strongest, the temperature inside the ship dropped. The crew shivered despite the warmth of their environment suits. A sudden, cold, tingling sensation crawled over their skin. Xelvar glanced out the window, and what he saw sent a jolt through his body. Below them, the land seemed frozen, with vast stretches of barren ground and dark forests. There were no cities, no signs of life, only dead silence, and in the distance, a massive structure loomed over the horizon, a fortress-like structure that seemed to pierce the sky. Zara's voice trembled. "There is something down there. Something not human." The ship's systems flickered as a strange force seemed to interfere with their instruments. Static buzzed through the comms, and the AI's usual calm demeanor was replaced with an uncharacteristic sense of urgency. "I'm unable to maintain stability, Captain. Something is blocking our systems." Xelvar clenched his fists, his mind racing. They had made it this far, and there was no turning back now. But the strange feeling that something was watching them, following their every move, made him second-guess his decision. Still, his curiosity urged him forward. "Land the ship. We need to investigate this structure." Soren looked at him, his eyes wide with fear. "Captain, This place, it doesn't feel right. Zelvar shook his head. Fear is a luxury we can't afford. Prepare for landing. The ship descended slowly, carefully landing on the ground near the massive structure. As the door to the ship opened, the air was thick with an oppressive weight. The ground beneath their boots was cracked and covered with a thin layer of dust. They had landed in what appeared to be a forgotten wasteland. There was no movement, no animals, no birds flying overhead. The only sound was the whisper of the wind, and it felt as though the entire planet held its breath. Zelvar stepped out, followed by his team. His boots crunched against the cracked earth. Every instinct he had screamed to leave, but he resisted. The structure in the distance still called to him. Keep your eyes open. Stay sharp. The crew approached the fortress-like building. It seemed ancient, far older than anything they had encountered. Alien symbols covered the walls, and strange markings glowed faintly in the dim light. It looked like a grave, and Zelvar felt as if he was disturbing something sacred. But it was too late. They had entered the forbidden zone, and now there was no turning back. The danger they had come here to uncover was closer than they thought, and it had been waiting for them. The Obsidian Voyager remained grounded in the silent wasteland of Earth, its engines barely humming. Inside, the crew moved cautiously, their footsteps echoing in the cold, sterile air of the ship. A heavy unease had settled over them, despite the excitement of discovery. The feeling that they were not alone, a presence lurking just beyond their awareness, seemed to grow with every passing moment. Captain Zelvar sat at the control desk, his eyes scanning the data pouring in from Zara, the ship's eye. The signals from Earth's surface were unlike anything they had encountered before. Even the most advanced species in the galaxy couldn't explain the energy readings they had picked up earlier. The planet was not just hiding secrets. It was almost as if it were alive, watching them. The energy levels are higher now, Captain. Zara's calm voice broke the silence, but it was tinged with an unfamiliar hint of concern. They've increased since we landed. Zelvar's hand hovered over the controls. He didn't want to admit it, but something in his gut told him this wasn't a typical exploration mission. He could feel the weight of the planet pressing in on them, as if Earth was aware of their presence. It wasn't simply a silent world. They were trespassers in a forgotten realm. I want a full scan of the area outside, Zelvar ordered, trying to shake the tension from his voice. Let's see what's causing these strange readings. As Zara began to scan the surface, the crew prepped their equipment. The exterior of the ship was cold to the touch, and the crew's movements were slow, deliberate. They knew they were no longer just visitors. They were intruders. The fortress-like structure in the distance still beckoned, its tall, jagged silhouette towering against the darkened sky. Captain, the scans are coming in, Zara reported, her voice steady but strained. The structure is not of any known design. The materials used are not from any civilization in the galaxy. Zelvar narrowed his eyes. What do you mean, Zara? What kind of materials? It's hard to describe. The structure's composition doesn't align with anything we have on record. It seems like it's been fused with something organic, Zara explained, her voice barely above a whisper now. This structure is not just built, it has grown. That sent a chill through the crew. Zelvar turned to the others, his expression hardening. Are you hearing this? It's not just a building. It's something far beyond us, something alive. Soran, the crew member who had been the most vocal about turning back, now stood stiffly at the window, gazing at the distant structure with dread in his eyes. Captain, whatever it is, we should leave now. We've broken the rules. The warnings were clear. We need to get off this planet before it notices us. But Zelvar's mind was already made up. Curiosity had taken hold of him completely. He had come this far, and he wasn't about to turn back. We're not leaving yet. We need answers. We can't leave until we understand what's happening here. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, but no one dared to argue. They all knew that once they stepped foot on Earth, they had already crossed a line. Whatever secrets the planet held, they were going to find them, whether they were ready for them or not. The air was thick with anticipation as the team gathered their gear and prepared to leave the ship. Each of them stepped out cautiously, the harsh wind biting at their exposed skin. The wasteland around them seemed almost too still, as though the planet itself was holding its breath, waiting. As they made their way toward the strange fortress, a low hum suddenly vibrated beneath their feet. The ground trembled faintly, and the air grew thick with static. It wasn't from the ship. This was something coming from beneath them. What was that? Soren asked, his voice shaking. He stopped dead in his tracks, eyes wide with fear. Zelvar held up his hand, signaling the crew to halt. The hum faded, leaving only the eerie quiet. He motioned for them to keep moving, but the unease was palpable. Something was happening, something beyond their control. They finally reached the base of the strange structure. The closer they got, the more they could feel it. An invisible weight, as if the structure was drawing them in, pushing them toward it. The walls of the fortress were covered in symbols, alien markings they had never seen before. They weren't just decorative. They seemed to pulse with an internal energy. The air itself felt charged, like static electricity, and the closer they got, the more the hum intensified. Zelvar turned to his crew. Prepare to scan the walls. Whatever this place is, it's not a typical structure. We need to figure out what we're dealing with before we go any further. As they began their scans, a sudden crackling noise came from the comm system. Zara's voice cut in urgently. Captain, I'm detecting a large energy fluctuation right beneath you. Before anyone could react, the ground shook, and the walls of the structure seemed to shift slightly. The crew stepped back in shock, their eyes wide with disbelief. Then, out of nowhere, they heard it. A soft whisper, almost like a murmur in the air. It was unintelligible at first, but then it became clearer, a chilling message in their minds. Leave, or perish. The crew froze. The planet had spoken. And now they realized Earth was not just an ordinary planet. It was a warning, a trap for those foolish enough to ignore the warnings of the past. Zelvar felt a cold sweat form on his brow. They had awakened something ancient, something far beyond their understanding. But it was already too late to turn back. The whisper still echoed in their minds, a voice that came from nowhere, yet everywhere. A voice that carried the weight of something ancient, something aware. Captain Zelvar clenched his jaw, forcing his body to remain still. His crew wasn't as composed. Soren's breathing had become ragged, his fingers gripping the scanner so tightly that his knuckles turned pale. The others exchanged uneasy glances, their earlier curiosity now replaced by a deep primal fear. The warning had been clear: leave, or perish. But Zelvar was not the type to turn away. Zara, scan for life forms. His voice was steady, but his hands trembled ever so slightly. The AI hesitated for a moment before responding. Scanning. Captain, I detect no biological life forms in the immediate vicinity. Zelvar exhaled, relief creeping into his mind. No life means no immediate threat. But then Zara's voice returned, this time quieter, almost as if she was hesitant to speak. Correction. There is something. A silence fell over the group. Explain. Zara's processors whirred for a second. I do not detect biological life. But there is activity. Beneath the ground. Something is moving, Captain. Something enormous. The word sent an involuntary shiver down Zelvar's spine. Soren took a step back. That's it. We're done here. You heard the warning, Captain. We're trespassing on something we don't understand. Zelvar turned to him sharply. We came here for answers. And we're closer than we've ever been. Soren's eyes widened with disbelief. Closer to what? Our deaths. You felt it, same as I did. This planet, something here does not want us to be here. Before Zelvar could argue, The ground trembled. It started as a low vibration beneath their feet, but within seconds, it intensified into a deep rumbling that sent cracks splintering across the dry surface. The fortress walls trembled, the symbols glowing brighter as if responding to something unseen. Then, the noise came. A deep, throaty sound, almost like a breath being drawn from beneath the planet's crust. It was neither mechanical nor organic. It was something else entirely. And it was waking up. Zelvar swallowed hard, his instincts finally screaming at him. He turned sharply toward the ship, back to the Voyager. Now, the crew didn't need to be told twice. They turned and sprinted, but as they ran, the tremors grew more violent. The ground bulged, as though something was trying to push its way through. The very planet seemed to be moving beneath them. Then came the first rupture. A section of the ground ahead of them split open, sending up a column of black mist, thick, swirling, and unnatural. It was neither gas nor smoke. It shimmered like liquid, moving as if it had a mind of its own. And it was spreading. The mist slithered toward them, drawn by some unseen force. The crew barely managed to change course, zigzagging around the fissures that continued to open around them. Zelvar's mind raced. What was this? No known planet behaved like this. No ancient ruins suddenly came alive. Unless, Captain, the ship. Zelvar's eyes snapped forward. The Obsidian Voyager was no longer where they left it. Or rather, it was there, but something was different. The mist had reached it. It clung to the ship's metallic hull like a living parasite, spreading tendrils of itself over the sleek surface. The Voyager's lights flickered, its systems glitching. Zara's voice cut in sharply. Warning. External corruption detected. Unknown interference affecting primary systems. Zelvar cursed under his breath. The planet wasn't just dangerous. It wasn't just some ancient mystery. It was fighting back. The mist was not just some natural phenomenon. It was an entity, something old, something forgotten. And now, it had taken an interest in them. Zara. Activate emergency protocols. Prep for immediate departure. The AI responded, but there was something in her voice that sent chills through Zelvar. Captain, there is a problem. The ship, it is no longer responding to my full control. Something is overriding my systems. Zelvar's blood ran cold. What? What do you mean overriding? A static-filled distortion interrupted Zora's next words. Then, an unfamiliar voice came through the comms. A voice that was not his eye. A voice that was not human. A voice that had been waiting. You were warned. You did not listen. Now, you will understand. Zelvar's breath caught in his throat. They weren't just intruders. They were prey. The silence that followed the voice felt like an eternity. Zelvar's heart pounded in his chest as his eyes darted to his crew, who were just as shaken as he was. The warning was clear. They were not welcome here, but what kind of force was it that could override Zora's sophisticated systems, making them powerless? Captain, we need to get out of here. Now. Soren's voice was trembling, but his fear was evident. His gaze was fixed on the horizon, where the mist still churned, shifting like some kind of living organism. The planet wasn't just alive, it was hostile. Zelvar clenched his fists, trying to steady his thoughts. He couldn't let fear take hold. Not yet. His crew depended on him. We can't leave yet. We're too close to understanding what this place is. But even as he spoke, the mist seemed to grow, slowly creeping toward them, as if it was deliberate. It wasn't just a byproduct of some natural process. It was active, hunting them. The rumbling below intensified again, and another deep, terrifying sound echoed from beneath the planet's surface. It was the sound of something enormous awakening, its slumber disturbed. A flicker of light caught Zelvar's eye. It wasn't from their ship, though. It was coming from the ground. The ancient ruins, now fully illuminated by the eerie glow of the mist, seemed to pulse in rhythm with the tremors. He stared at them, piecing the puzzle together in his mind. It's a trap. Zora's voice came through again, sounding almost distant, as though the AI were struggling to remain coherent. The planet itself is a weapon, designed to keep intruders away. The mist, it's a defense mechanism. It's alive. Zelvar felt a shiver run down his spine. Alive? But how? What are we dealing with here, Zara? Before Zara could respond, a massive shadow moved across the ruins. Something was emerging from beneath the ground, its size too massive to be anything the crew had ever encountered. The mist parted, swirling around the emerging figure like a cloak of darkness, revealing a towering silhouette. Its form was vague, its shape constantly shifting, as if it existed in multiple planes of reality at once. The crew stood frozen, the weight of its presence bearing down on them. "What is that?" Soren whispered, his voice barely audible, but filled with a terror that gripped Zelvar's heart. He couldn't answer. He didn't know. The figure, whatever it was, seemed to look at them, not with eyes, but with an awareness, as if it understood their presence and the danger they posed. The rumblings grew louder, more urgent, until it became a deafening roar, shaking the very ground beneath their feet. "It's coming," shouted Raylan, one of the officers, his face pale with fear. His words were followed by a scream as the earth beneath him cracked open. A deep chasm formed where Raylan had been standing, and before anyone could react, the mist surged, consuming him completely. The crew watched in horror, unable to do anything but stare as he was swallowed by the dark void. Zelvar could feel his stomach tighten. There was no time for hesitation. They had to leave. "Zara, can you get us out of here?" Zelvar shouted, trying to remain calm. There was a long pause. For a moment, he thought the AI was lost. But then Zora's voice returned, though it was distant, as though struggling to keep up with the rapidly changing circumstances. "Captain, I cannot regain full control over the Voyager. It's as if something has infected the ship's systems." The air around them shuddered. The mist was closer now, closer than ever, and something was coming through it. Zelvar could see movement, large, monstrous shapes, rising from the depths of the planet's surface, like hungry predators waiting for their prey. He glanced back at the ruins. They were not just ruins. They were fortresses. Fortresses built by a civilization far older than anything he had ever imagined. And they had been abandoned for a reason. He understood now. They had been abandoned because this planet was a weapon, a defense system designed to keep away anyone who wasn't meant to be there. "We need to leave." Soren screamed again, but his voice was drowned out by the crackling sound of the ground splitting apart as more of the monstrous shapes emerged. Some were invisible, their forms only hinted at by the shifting mist. Others were large, massive beings, their forms like twisted nightmares. Zelvar had to think fast. He couldn't let this planet's strange defense mechanisms take them down. They had to escape. Now. "We're going to make a break for the ship. Everyone, stay close," Zelvar ordered, his voice sharp and commanding. He didn't have time to think about the why. They just had to run. The crew turned and began to sprint, but the ground continued to crack beneath them, and the mist reached higher, moving like tendrils that tried to ensnare them, dragging at their legs. Then, from behind, came the sound of growing footsteps. Zelvar dared not look back, but the sound alone was enough to send him running faster. He could feel it now, the hot breath of something pursuing them, its footsteps pounding the earth like thunder. Zelvar ran faster than he ever had in his life. His breath was ragged, his heart pounded in his chest, and his legs burned with exhaustion. But the sound behind him, the heavy, monstrous footsteps, pushed him forward. His crew was right beside him, their eyes wide with panic, their movements fueled by pure survival instinct. The mist around them thickened, swirling like an intelligent force. It wasn't just some strange atmospheric phenomenon. It was alive, and it was hunting them. "We're almost there," Soren shouted, pointing at the Voyager, their ship, which stood just a few hundred meters away. The sight of it was a beacon of hope, but deep down, Selvar felt a sinking dread. Something was wrong. The ship's lights were flickering erratically, as if something had taken control of its systems. The entrance ramp was still open, but the usual hum of power and energy that surrounded the Voyager was missing. It was like a lifeless shell. Zara. Open emergency launch protocols. We're coming in hot. Selvar barked into his communicator. Static. A flicker of a voice, Zara's voice, whispered back through the comms. But it was distorted, broken. Captain. They're inside. Selvar's blood ran cold. Inside. Before he could process those words, a loud boom echoed behind them. The ground shattered, sending chunks of stone and metal flying in all directions. A massive claw-like appendage slammed into the ground where they had been just seconds ago. Selvar turned his head for just a moment, and regretted it instantly. The creature had fully emerged from the ruins. It was colossal, its form shifting, never fully settling into a recognizable shape. It had no eyes, but it could see them. It had no mouth, yet Selvar could feel its hunger. It wasn't just a predator. It was something far worse. Something that shouldn't exist. Rallin, one of the crew members, screamed. He froze, his body paralyzed with fear. The mist curled around his legs, tightening like a living rope. No! Move! Selvar shouted, but it was too late. With terrifying speed, the mist yanked Rallin backward. He vanished into the swirling darkness before anyone could react. A horrible, muffled scream cut off abruptly. Then, silence. Selvar clenched his jaw, forcing himself to keep moving. There was no time to grieve. Not now. They reached the Voyager's entrance ramp, practically throwing themselves inside. Soren slammed the emergency lock button, and the ramp began to rise. The moment they were inside, Selvar activated the ship's internal defenses. But the ship didn't respond. The control panels flickered, unresponsive. The screens flashed with alien symbols, not from any known species. The Voyager's systems had been completely taken over. And then, a new sound filled the air. A footstep. Inside the ship. Selvar's heart nearly stopped. His breath caught in his throat. His crew looked at him, their faces drained of color. The realization sank in like a stone. They were not alone. Selvar stood frozen in place, his breath shallow, his hands trembling slightly as he reached for his weapon. The rest of his crew did the same, eyes darting around the dimly lit corridor of the Voyager. Something was inside the ship with them. The heavy footstep had been unmistakable. It wasn't mechanical. It wasn't one of them. It was something else. The emergency lights flickered as the ship's systems continued to fail. The air felt thick, too thick, as if the very atmosphere had changed. A strange, low humming sound filled the corridors, vibrating through the metal walls. Soren, gripping his plasma rifle tightly, whispered, "Captain, we need to get to the bridge. If we can override the lockdown." A second footstep echoed. Closer. Then another. Selvar held up a hand, signaling silence. He motioned for the crew to move, keeping their steps light, careful. If the intruder didn't know where they were yet, they had to keep it that way. But deep down, Selvar knew. It already knew. They reached a corridor intersection, the pathway leading to the bridge just ahead. Soren took the lead, checking the corner before gesturing all clear. They moved quickly, hearts pounding, sweat forming on their brows. But then, the lights cut out completely. Total darkness. And in that suffocating blackness, something whispered. Not in words, not in any language Selvar had ever heard. It was a sound, a sensation, that crawled through his mind, filling his skull with an unbearable weight. It was inside his head. Zara let out a strangled cry, gripping her helmet as if trying to block out the invasive presence. Soren dropped to his knees, shaking, his weapon clattering to the floor. Zelvar clenched his jaw, forcing himself to move. He reached for the emergency panel on the wall, slamming his hand against it. Backup power engage. The dim red emergency lights flickered on, and standing at the far end of the corridor was the thing. It wasn't just a creature. It wasn't something that belonged in this reality. Its form was unstable, flickering between shapes. At one moment it seemed humanoid, then a mass of shifting limbs, then a shadow with too many eyes. But the worst part, the part that made Zelvar's blood run cold, was that it was watching them. And it was smiling. "Run!" Zelvar shouted, grabbing Soren and dragging him to his feet. The crew bolted. Their boots pounded against the metal floors as they sprinted toward the bridge. The creature moved too, not by running, but by shifting. One moment it was far behind them. The next, it was right at their backs. The door to the bridge slid open just as they reached it. The moment they were inside, Zelvar slammed the manual lock. The thick security doors sealed shut. For a second, everything was quiet. Then, bang! Something slammed against the door with inhuman strength. Again, and again. Zelvar turned to Zora. "Get the engines online. Now." She didn't argue. Her fingers flew across the control panel, attempting to override the corrupted system. Soren was still shaking, gripping the control console for support. "Captain," it spoke to me. In my head. It knows who we are. It knows everything about us. Zelvar swallowed hard. He wasn't sure what terrified him more, the fact that the creature had followed them inside, or the fact that it understood them. Zora cursed. "I can't. Something is overriding our thrusters. I can't break through." The hull groaned as something crawled over the ship, its presence pressing against them like a suffocating weight. The red emergency lights flickered again. The temperature dropped, their breath turning to mist. Then, the ship spoke. But it wasn't Zora. It wasn't the system eye. It was the thing outside. "You should not have come here." The voice wasn't just one voice. It was many, layered over each other, a chorus of whispers that dug into their skulls. And then, for the first time, Zelvar felt something he had never truly experienced before. Pure, inescapable terror. The ship trembled, the hull groaning under an unseen force. The entity outside was not trying to break in. It was becoming part of the ship. Zelvar felt it pressing against his mind, like fingers digging through his thoughts. It wasn't just speaking to him. It was reading him. Zora frantically worked at the controls. The system is rewriting itself. It's changing the ship's structure. This isn't possible. Soren clutched his head, his breath ragged. It's not technology. It's not a life form. He stopped, his face pale as realization struck. Zelvar turned to him. "What?" Soren swallowed hard. "It's the planet itself." Silence filled the bridge. Zara stared at him. "What are you saying?" Soren's voice was barely a whisper. "Earth isn't just a planet. It's alive. And it sees us." The word sent a chill through them all. Zelvar's mind raced. It made sense. The way their ship's systems were failing, the way the entity shifted, as if it had no fixed form. It wasn't a single being. It wasn't an intruder. It was Earth itself, manifesting through something they couldn't understand. And they had trespassed. The whispers returned, wrapping around them like a cold wind. "You were warned." The ship lurched violently. Warning alarms blared as the control panels cracked, glowing with an unnatural energy. The crew barely had time to react before the ship was lifted, not by engines, but by something far greater. The stars shifted outside the viewport. The ship was moving. Fast. Zelvar grabbed the console, watching in disbelief as the distance between them and Earth expanded. Zara gasped. "We're being sent away." The pressure in the air faded. The whispers grew distant. The ship's systems restored themselves, but something felt different, as if they had been marked, branded by something far older than the stars. Soren exhaled, his hands still shaking. We need to tell the council. We need to warn them. Zelvar nodded. But they won't believe us. A heavy silence filled the bridge. They had come to Earth seeking answers, but they had left with a warning. And deep down, Zelvar knew, if they ever returned, Earth would not be merciful again.